of the SCG Tour this season. Erin Barich playing mono red aggro. She's going to be taking on Ross Merriam, Warzaw Vampires. Ross building some kind of dice contraption presently, like a mad scientist.
Mad something.
Right, mad something. Ross going to go ahead and lead on Knight here. Powerful one drop this Vampires deck has picked up. Post M20. Barich just plays Mountain and passes. Knight of the Ebon Legion going to go ahead and rumble in. Barich does have the shock. Makes sense, given the play patterns. Follow-up for Merriam. Looks like it's going to be Legion Lieutenant.
And you see Merriam being a little bit tricky there, right? You would think just play the Legion Lieutenant before I attack, but he sniffs out the shock and then leaves the better creature on the board.
Yeah.
Or what he feels is the better creature.
That's where I was getting to next. I mean, that card, Knight of the Ebon Legion, could just take over games on its own. Speaking of taking over games on its own, it's Sorin. And this is the most powerful card in the Vampires deck, without question. Barich, though, going to negate the first Sorin play with a Lightning Strike. No benefit from the plus there. Onto the Legion Lieutenant. And then Barich going to quickly get to the business of attacking down Sorin. Fanatical Firebrand, get to Lava Runner. Chasing down Sorin. But Merriam has another Vampire to deploy. It's Vicious Conquistador getting the benefit from Sorin here.
And Merriam, he made another similar play where, that turn he sniffs out the Lightning Strike, and you would think he'd want to play, his Planeswalker first, pump his guy, and then attack, get the extra point in, get the lifelink. But same thing, he's like, I think there's another removal spell. It's just so doubtful that my opponent would pass with 2 mana open with no play here. So He attacks first, gets in the 2 points, and then plays his Planeswalker.
Barich catching in a bunch of creatures. You can see why. She's got Experimental Frenzy. Going to be able to recoup that card disadvantage very quickly. Doesn't mind getting 2 for 1 in that scenario. But a powerful follow-up from Merriam as well. Champion of Dusk.
And I love this. We're getting to see both these decks do the exact things that they want to do.
Right. Very true. Barich with a nice one off the top.
Oof.
It's Chandra.
Look at all this action.
Chandra going to choose a mode here. Can find attackers, can find goodies in the graveyard. I think we made some elementals and attacked, even if we didn't see them actually come onto the battlefield. It's implied by the way the numbers have moved. They are searching for elementals.
Oh, they better have them.
Their time has passed at this point.
They better find them anyway.
Here comes the champion attack. On to Chandra. Follow up Sky Marcher Aspirant. Ross is going to go ahead and plus onto that Aspirant. Ross playing very cautiously, appropriately so, I believe. Here's a Lightning Strike off the top for Aaron. He's going to take out Sky Marcher Aspirant. That was in upkeep.
Oof, stuck.
Yeah. Spinning the wheel a little bit with that Experimental Frenzy, as you often do.
Yeah, the Frenzy is this tough card because you want to make a land drop every single turn, but you never want to hit that pocket where you have 2 or 3 lands in a row. So it's sometimes a fickle animal.
I love how Ross is just not prioritizing the life gain from Sorin, just instead making sure his creatures are getting bigger and bigger. Knows that if Sorin does its thing, there'll be time to cash in the life gain advantage in the future. We talked a bit about Sorin on this week's Arena Decklist podcast. I posited that if you're willing to accept its restrictions, Sorin is in probably the top 3 for most powerful planeswalkers of all time. It comes with a lot of deck building restrictions, but as far as what it does once it's on the battlefield, it's just absolutely insane.
Well, because it's 3 mana.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like we have to...
Absolutely, yeah. If all things are equal, give me Karn every time. Thank you. But, You have to certainly consider the mana cost. And, of course, you do have to consider restrictions and deck building that Sorin brings with it. Quite frankly, after M20 rotates, we're kind of expecting this card to not do all that much.
Oof, and this is a tough spot. When you have to blow up your own experimental frenzy in order to try to claw back into the game, it's not where you want to be.
Erin does have a handful of gas, though. See if she can leverage it at this point.
Yep, but here's the problem. You want to get the Sorin off the board. You have to kill the flyer, and you have to chump block this other guy.
Yeah. Let's see if Erin can find the answer. Here comes Goblin Chain Whirler at Ross. Because we need to light up the stage. Makes sense.
Oh, this is a tough spot.
Yeah, tough spot, but makes sense. What's the follow-up? Skewer the Critics.
Okay.
Yeah, forcing Ross to have something in hand. Play to your outs.
And it looks like we have a replacement experimental frenzy. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Yeah,
I think that's a lightning strike, but I'm mostly grasping at straws here. You could be correct. That looks like the guild symbol, and maybe it's gold.
I'm sure we'll figure it out next turn if the game doesn't end here.
Right. If it's important, we'll tell you. Here's an attack from that Champion of Dusk. It is going to gain some life this time. Ross has to pass the turn back, so here's a small window for Erin.
And that's the thing about playing the Vampires deck, is you have no deck manipulation. You have very little in the way of card advantage.
Right.
So sometimes you hit this pocket of lands, draw 3 or 4 in a row, and there's nothing you can do about it.
A couple of results from our other matches. There you see Tan and Grace up a game over Rudy Briksza. Harlan Freerer also up a game over Alexander Beebe. Urza Mirror going on. Quasi-Mirror. Not exactly the same construction. Well, you were right, Gray. Experimental Frenzy. The land being played from light up the stage.
Yeah, and Erin wondering just how cautious to play here. I think you still need to move towards getting that Sorin off the board. So you can attack it here, and the next turn you chump block with your Ember Hauler and throw it at the Planeswalker to finish it off. The problem with a line like that is any removal spell just finishes the game.
Yeah, dead to anything, basically. Yeah, Erin did not feel like she could attack there.
I guess this way works just as well, where you can still block with Ember Hauler, throw it at the Planeswalker, and in most scenarios you'll be able to attack next turn with the Chain Whirler, and you also have the discretion of looking at what happens with Experimental Frenzy before you make that attack. So this is a better line. I like it.
Good to see you're in agreement with Erin here. Erin, of course, one of the best aggressive players on the SCG Tour, known for piloting this deck as well as Infect very, very competently. Ross really weighing his next move here. I mean, this feels like the critical juncture. I think if Erin gets to untap here, you can see a bunch of scenarios where the game swings very hard in her favor.
Yeah, I agree. Erin has more creatures in the deck than we're used to seeing out of the mono red deck with the extra Ember Haulers in there. So the likelihood of finding another creature to play off the Experimental Frenzy is very high.
Here's the play from Ross. It looks like Sorin uptick. What are we doing with that token, Ross? Do we want to throw it?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I think so.
Kill the Chain Whirler here.
Ross agrees. Ross now hellbent. Barich 7 lands in play. and Experimental Frenzy. Here's Goblin Chain Whirler.
It's a good start.
Yeah. Next card, Ember Hauler. That one's nice too. Next card, Fanatical Firebrand. That one's pretty good. Next card, Mountain. Okay, we'll take it.
Exactly what you want, yeah. Oh, more.
Next card, Runaway Steamkin. Experimental Frenzy is not a bad Magic card.
It's pretty absurd sometimes.
I think we're rapidly approaching a place where Aaron is the favorite.
Yeah, I think we're already there. Ross just has so few draws that we'll be able to outpace the Experimental Frenzy. You know, just one creature a turn kind of a thing is not going to do it here. And if you look, so many of his draws are small creatures too, where he's going to just have them die to the Ember Hauler or the Fanatical Firebrand.
Right. I agreed with Ross's play last turn, but I wonder if like you're reaching a point where you just have to start hoping you can dome your opponent out with Sorin, and you have another one on the top of your deck. And so as opposed to killing that Chain Whirler, you just had to go face. I mean, if you're doing that, you basically believe you have fallen pretty far behind in the game, and I think a lot of that hinged on just how good Aaron's next turn was. So I don't blame Ross for not assessing the game as being at that point. I would have done the same thing he did in his position. But now, hindsight being 2020, you start to think, maybe that was my window. Ross still at a very healthy 25 life. No more life gain here, though. Fanatical Firebrand's going to hit the bin before lifelink has its chance to do its thing.
Yeah, I like that Aaron has stayed at 4 life. Like, obviously with Sorin, that's such a critical life total to be at.
Yes.
And, ooh, there we go.
Here's a Mortify. Okay. Okay.
Oh, look at all those spells.
Yeah, that's the problem when Experimental Frenzy has been around for a little while. See an Ember Hauler. I think I see a Skewer the Critics.
How much damage do you think that Sorin has taken this game?
Pretty good amount. Turns out when all of your abilities are pluses, you live for a very long time on the battlefield. Finally, Sorin hits the bin. Here's Skewer the Critics. And it looks like the third and final Experimental Frenzy in hand for Aaron.
Yeah, and Aaron's wondering if she wants to play a land first.
Right.
Or if she's worried about running into a land off the top of the deck.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision.
I don't think I would have played the land just because I have all of that mana available from the Steamkin.
Right. Well, we're going to cash in those 2 Ember Haulers to kill that champion. And now Ross with nothing. Living off the top of the deck against an Experimental Frenzy. Not where you want to be as the Vampires player. And Aaron has done such a good job navigating this game. I don't think there are many mono-red players who would have made it through this game in Aaron's position.
Yeah, I like a lot of the lines that we took in this game.
There's another Goblin Chain Whirler. Light up the stage. Pretty good cards.
One, look at how much
Another
mana is
Runaway
available.
Steamkin. I mean, this game's over. This game's absolutely over. Here's a Shock. Runaway Steamkin gets bigger.
Yeah.
I'm trying to construct draws from Ross's side that he can put together, but I just don't think there's anything. A third Runaway Steamkin.
Yeah, the 400th Runaway Steamkin. This is...
Yeah, Aaron's going to basically play her deck at this point.
Oh,
Oh, good lord. Good lord. The full 4.
and what a gentleman Ross is, just letting this all
Right.
happen, you know?
Right. It's so rare for these mono-red players to get all of their Runaway Steamkins in play. You have to give them a chance to just do their thing one time.
Do you have to? Because I wouldn't. I would not let this keep going.
You would have scooped by now. Yeah, I'm probably right there with you.
This is so absurd.
I really think both players played this game so well. Think back to how Ross managed the early turns, carefully playing around everything.
Well, he eked out those couple extra points of damage here and there.
Right.
And it was almost exactly the right amount, you know? He imagine if he didn't squeeze those few extra points out, the opponent would still be at 6 or 7 or 8. Like he wouldn't have had that Sorin there to threaten to win the game.
Well, here come the beats from Aaron. Ross going to need a miracle off the top of the deck. Spoiler, there is not one.
All is dust?
It's certainly not Swamp. And Ross is going to go ahead and pack it in. Aaron Barich takes down game 1.
Just absolute nail biter. I love it.
Excellent, excellent magic there. Impressive stuff from both sides. Aaron with the only win on her side of the table right now. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at the sideboards here. We'll start on Aaron's side. There you see 3 Blood Sun, 3 Fry, 3 Lava Coil, 2 Hijack, 1 Chandra Acolyte of Flame, 1 Tybalt Rakish Instigator, Experimental Frenzy, and a Dire Fleet Daredevil. What are you doing in the Vampires matchup?
So I feel like this is a grindy matchup where you trade a lot of resources earlier in the game. So I think you're going to want this last Experimental Frenzy in your deck. We've seen just how ridiculous the card can be. I can see the Dire Fleet Daredevil coming in after sideboard. I think Ross is going to have a little more removal out of his deck. And just picking up the card advantage with the threat is pretty good there. I can see the potential for the Lava Coil to be good if you're worried about the bigger creatures that are harder to get off of the board. So I can see, that Lava Coil, maybe Fry if you want more removal, but I think the mono red deck has plenty of removal options. There's enough black creatures where maybe you just don't want the Fry in the deck.
Right, and I think you need to make sure you maintain your creature density, your ability to maintain aggression. You don't want to fall too far into the controlling role, although I think that's kind of how this match plays out. Mono red looking to control the pace in the early turns, then leverage Experimental Frenzy to pull ahead. You just can't go 100% in that direction.
Sure, but we saw how Light Up the Stage and Experimental Frenzy allow you to play that more controlling role, where the Vampire deck has fewer cards that have that type of impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, over on Ross's side, we see 4 Noxious Revival, 4 Duress, 3 Devout Decree, 2 Gideon Blackblade, 1 D-Spark, and 1 God Eternal Oketra. What are you doing if you're in Ross's seat?
So this is very similar where, he thinks the red deck is going to be more controlling and get a little bit bigger. I think he kind of wants to do the same thing. All of his early quote-unquote beatdown creatures, his 1-drops are just so vulnerable and don't get the job done. So I like things like the God Eternal Oketra. The Gideon Blackblade is another Planeswalker that just forces the opponent to try to deal with it all the time. And then we've got some things that can answer the Experimental Frenzies, and Devout Decree gets that card, right? It's permanent or creature?
It's creature and Planeswalker.
Creature, okay.
Yep.
You see how little I've been playing with that card.
Yeah, well, see, I started in that position, then I started playing a bunch of Devout Decrees because it is very, very impactful in the Vampires matchup. Dealing with Sorin is a really important function of it, but it does have that hole where it's unable to answer Experimental Frenzy, and I think that's part of the reason why Experimental Frenzy has been able to reclaim some metagame share.
Sure. And so then the question is, do I want Duress in my deck, and do I want this very narrow D-Spark in my deck?
Yeah, tough decisions on both sides. You really have to decide exactly what role you want to play in the matchup. I saw Aaron sideboard very confidently. It was immediately grab these cards, they go in. Ross, a little bit slower, but still, I think these players know how they want to play this matchup. They didn't show up today unprepared.
Oh, no.
They are very rehearsed, especially on the mono red side. In a lot of ways, I guess this isn't true for Erin because she's been playing it for so long, but many people are returning to mono red because they feel it presents a favorable matchup against Orzhov Vampires.
And it clocks the Scapeshift decks quite well.
Right. And if any Nexus shows up, I've done enough shows where red just completely obliterates Nexus out of the room. People were talking about that deck as an answer to Scapeshift stuff. Well, mono red will be happy to play on any Nexus shenanigans going on.
Sure, and that's kind of a format thing that you see regularly in Standard is where the decks get bigger and bigger and bigger, trying to go over the top of each other, and then the best beatdown deck, whatever that might be, whether it's mono white or the red deck, just comes in underneath when the metagame gets too out of control.
Yep.
And reminds everyone that there's other things you can be doing.
Yeah, sounds right to me. Well, if you're looking to get your licks in with this Vampires deck, you're certainly going to need the key cards from Core Set 2020. You can go ahead and get your order in today at go.starcitygames.com/M20. Pick up the hotness such as Lotus Field. Have you seen the Lotus Field?
The Twiddle deck.
Yeah, well, there's the Twiddle deck in Modern, and there's also the Lotus Field decks playing Blood Sun main, and they just leverage that to make large mana. I've seen it happen with Scape Shift. I've seen it happen in conjunction with Nexus of Fate.
Yep.
I've seen all kinds of Lotus Field shells. Really interesting deck building going on with that card for sure.
Yeah, I think Lotus Field is an exciting card, and we're just starting to scratch the surface of what we want to do with it.
Right, absolutely. And there you see Mu Yanling, Sky Dancer, a card I advocated for in builds of Jeskai Planeswalkers recently. I think it's very impactful in the Vampires matchup. We'll have to see how much that card does going forward. Been kind of a miss thus far.
Yeah, it hasn't found the right home yet.
Right.
But for a 3-mana Planeswalker, it has some very strong abilities on it.
I think so. There's a lot of good 3-mana Planeswalkers in this format, though, including Sorin, who we just saw, Teferi.
How did this happen? How did we get here?
I don't know. I really don't know. I remember doing my set review for War of the Spark and actually writing off some of the 3-mana Planeswalkers under the assumption that, okay, Wizards knows how good 3-mana Planeswalkers are.
They're
going to be super careful with these.
Everyone on Wizards is like on LSD or something, and like they've just lost their minds. They've gone crazy with the Planeswalkers.
Well, my partner has gotten to the conspiracy theory phase of the day where he believes Wizards is dosing, and therefore Planeswalkers have gotten out of control.
Have they not gotten out of control?
I mean, this set of Planeswalkers is crazy. I'll give you that.
Do you have a better explanation for this?
As of now, I do not.
All right, there we go.
I feel like that's the foundation of all good conspiracy theories. Like, well, do you have a better explanation?
Yep, that's it.
No, I think they were trying to emphasize a certain style of play, and I will be honest, for the most part, I have enjoyed this Planeswalker heavy standard. I was very trepidatious about it, but I think there's really interesting points. There's a lot of similarities in some of the play patterns. A lot of times it comes about protect your Planeswalkers, pressure opposing Planeswalkers, but there's interesting decisions to be made along the way.
And on a similar vein, I think that limited format was a whole lot more fun than people expected it to be.
Agreed.
I might rag on them a little bit, give them a hard time, but the recent limited formats have been gems for limited play.
M20 among them.
Yep.
Good reason to grab a box of that and hold on to it. I know a lot of people talking about this as a very, very high-ranking limited set. I'm inclined to agree. Looks like Ross is going to check in with Harlan here.
Phone a friend, sure.
Yeah. Both players seem bemused by the hand, I would say. Ultimately, Ross is going to go ahead and take a mulligan. Aaron looks content with 7, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like that Skewer the Critics got sided out of the deck as well.
Yeah. Very prominently featured in our point of view. A few other things I saw while players were shuffling. Daredevil definitely made the cut. No surprise there.
The Lava Coil was in there.
I saw Gideon Blackblade on Ross's side. Sounds like we're all tied up in our legacy match. Rudy Briksza, Tan and Grace, 4-color Delver versus Teamer Delver. Going to game 3. Ross is on a mulligan to 5 here.
5 is not a lot of cards,
no.
Especially when you're an aggressive deck.
I will say this. In most instances, I'm pretty comfortable with Vampire's shot once it goes to 5 because it has Sorin. If there's a deck where that starts to break down a little bit, I think it's probably against Mono Red, where you really need more access to resources in those matchups. And against a lot of decks, you can just leverage Sorin, and that's enough. Going to be harder here, though.
Sure, yeah, especially if it's the optimal start of Sorin into Champion of Dusk, drawing 2 or 3 cards.
Absolutely.
But when all of your early creatures are going to get cleaned up easily, the Champion of Dusk is generally just going to net you 1 card.
I think that's right. Especially against the burn deck like Aaron's. Lots of removal available. Love we're starting to see Blood Sun creep its way into this format. It took a little while, but it is the correct adaptation, I believe. talked a little bit about the possibility of a feather resurgence based on being able to do Blood Sun Flame Sweep shenanigans out of the sideboard to answer the otherwise horrendous Scape Shift matchup. I don't know if that's enough, but you could see how Feather would do a good job preying on these two decks.
Yeah, just the guys get so big, but it can keep up with the pace of play.
One mana removal, too. One mana removal as a whole is criminally underrepresented in this format. When I was playing Jeskai Planeswalkers over the last couple of weeks, that was really one of the selling points of the deck for me, is just having access to Shock again.
Yep.
Saw some Disfigures creeping back into Esper Control list over the past week. People recognizing that there was a 1 mana removal sized gap in present plans.
Yes, yeah, especially with the uptick in vampires, but also just taking out a Llanowar Elf early is so valuable.
It's like Ross found a 5 that he can work with. Just going to play a tap land. Barich, on the other hand, Fanatical Firebrand. Getting in the beats starting on turn 1. Ross going to fall to 19. Takes a draw here. Has lands, has spells. When it comes to a multi 5, your expectations are pretty low.
Well, we know what he drew for the turn.
See a Lava Coil in Aaron's hand. Just going to use the cheapest removal spell here, Shock. Wants to hold that Lava Coil for future use, and you see why. Light up the stage. Going to find 2 more cards. Not the most impactful, but cheap ones.
Well, it's exactly what you want, right? You want to keep making your land drops. You want to develop your board, a little bit of pressure, and it's card advantage.
Right. Yeah, against an already resource-light opponent.
Yeah, it might not seem like the most exciting cards to flip over, but if I was on Aaron's side, I'd be very happy with that light up the stage.
Yeah, and Aaron did find an exciting draw. Experimental Frenzy. We saw what that card can do. Here come a pair of Fanatical Firebrands into the red zone. Ross going to fall down to 16. Ember Hauler is the follow-up here. Aaron passed the turn back to Ross. I think Devout Decree was the draw. Legion's End. Oh, and another one in hand.
Yeah, it's funny. You can't get around that by not playing your guy.
Right. Could have left one untapped, theoretically, and that would have saved the one in hand, but that's just after sight.
I can't see sacrificing that amount of damage.
I agree with you. Ross presently at 14. A little bit of a graphics glitch on our end. We'll do our best to keep you apprised of life totals.
All right, Ross, we're going to have to start doing something.
Here's Devout Decree. That'll clean up that Runaway Steamkin. Let's Ross take a look at the top of the library.
Yeah, and after Ross mulligans this number of times, just watching him try to play, the bit more of the control route. His deck isn't great at pressuring the red deck, but he's also not great as playing the control game either.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like such a rough matchup.
Yeah, I think common perception is that mono red is favored here. And Orzhov Vampires kind of went without a Predator for a few weeks. One thing New Standard, though, has proven to me is that there's a Predator for everything. Sometimes you got to work for it, but we're not in an era of black-red aggro again, where there's just one deck, and it will always have 53% against the field.
Sure. And there's so many good cards. That's what I just can't get over when I look at Standard. There are so many good cards. There's tons of Planeswalkers that don't see play. There's tons of powerful Legends that don't see play. And it just speaks to how many toys the Wizards has given us to play with, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Ross falling to 11 after that attack. 2 Legions landing going to be the play from Ross, conveniently doing so after that Goblin Chain Whirler has come down. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's a second Goblin Chain Whirler, and 5 more headed Ross's way. Ross is going to fall to 6, and this one might be about over here. It is.
So
Ross going to extend the hand. That is going to do it. Aaron Barich takes down Ross Merriam 2-0. We're going to get you over to one of these other matches as quickly as we can. Yeah, that one played out about how I expected it to.
Man, Experimental Frenzy.
Didn't even need it.
What a card.
Still had all these experimental frenzies.
Still had all these.
Sounds like we're going to get some legacy action for you at the end here. Always like to see Tan and Grace piloting his trademark Delvers. Going to be taking on no stranger to the Delver himself, Rudy Briksza.
Yeah, pretty similar lists we're looking at here.
What does Briksza get from his 4th color?
So the black, he's getting Gurmag Angler.
Okay, that matters a lot here.
Abrupt Decay.
Yeah.
And I would imagine a whole mess of sideboard cards.
Right.
Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Surgical Extraction, if you count that. Liliana's Triumph. And Plague Engineer.
Triumph, not a bad card to have when you're doing the true name battle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would guess that these matches are all about early Ren and 6 and then the true name Nemesis after that.
Mm-hmm. Tannen with access to 2 Dreadhorde Arcanist in his list. Card started as a 4 of for a while. Trending down.
Yeah, I feel like that's a card that made a big splash, and then people were like, all right, I don't want to let this card beat me anymore.
Right.
And once people start being prepared for that card, you don't want a bunch of these 2-drops gumming up your hand.
I think Plague Engineer getting a very good foothold in the format was a big step towards mitigating the card's effectiveness to some degree. Just a preordain for early action here from Briksza.
And our game counts at the top of the page are not correct right now. We're aware.
Right.
And now you're aware.
We will get that squared away.
This is kind of classic Delver here. Just a mess of wastelands to start the game.
Yeah.
Who's going to be a little more fortunate to draw their basics.
This is definitely a style of Delver game that you see play out quite often.
Yeah, I say basics. I don't really mean basic lands. Just colored sources.
Just something that you can keep on the battlefield. Yep. Yeah, basics non-existent in Legacy right now, basically.
Except for Bomberman.
Except for Bomberman. One of the reasons why I believe Mono Red Prison has seen a pretty good run of things as of late.
And we've seen the 4-color control deck that plays basic snowlands.
Right. Yeah, a few Astrolabes out there that can help mitigate any mana screw that may be caused by Blood Moon. Briksza just stockpiling fetches right now in the face of these wastelands from Tannen.
And Rudy has a Ren and 6 in his hand. And it's one of those situations where Rudy's really trying to sculpt the correct hand to deploy this Ren and 6.
Yep.
And as long as he gets it to resolve, it's just wasteland the opponent every turn for the rest of the game.
Yep. Ren and 6 is basically a KO here, and that's why you're seeing Rudy be so cautious about it. Not one you just windmill slam into your opponent's deck filled with Daze, Spell Pierce, Spell Snare. Spell Snare also a card picking up because of the prevalence of Ren and 6.
Force of Will, Force of Negation.
Mm-hmm. Yep, keeping options open for counterplay against Red and 6.
Boom, look at that. Graphics.
Nailed it. I will say the internet gremlins have been out in force this weekend. Someone released the gremlins on us. Our artifacts entered the bin. They got 2 twos. It was very painful.
Gremlins. We need to revisit some gremlins, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing more gremlins around Magic the Gathering.
Maybe an Eldraine.
Who knows? Who knows what's in Eldraine? People got very hyped on fairies for a moment, and that proved to be mostly false, it seems. So,
oh, was that false? See, I'm not part of the
you're not up on the
buzz.
gossip?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we know is that there are.
No! This is the nightmare. I'm sorry. So when you're just trying to play so carefully, but then you can't stop the opponent's true name nemesis,
Yeah.
you're really far behind.
Yeah, true name nemesis, kind of everything in this matchup. Though, as we mentioned, options for Briksza.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Tannen plays mostly cold to a resolved true name nemesis.
I'm sorry, you were telling me about the Throne of Eldraine
The
buzz.
fairies.
Yeah.
So word on the street is that while people assumed it was a fairy-centric set, it appears there are some fairies and some mention of fairies, but not necessarily fairy-centric. Here comes an attempted Ren and 6 from Briksza. Grace, though, has the response in days. Things starting to go Tannen's way right now. Going to go ahead and attack with that true name nemesis. See if Tannen wants to get some Wasteland going.
Yeah, Tannen's been very patient with that Wasteland, and we've seen it pay dividends.
Right. Now possibly getting to take Rudy off black.
You know, if he had used the Wasteland earlier, the dazes that he used, he would have had to return islands to his hand instead of just hard casting them the way that he did.
Right.
At least the first one.
The first
and
one.
You know, then he wouldn't necessarily have been able to deploy.
Look at this.
The true
Rudy
name.
brainstorms and just extends the hand, and that is going to do it. Tannen Grace beating Rudy Briksza there.
Oof.
That was pretty wild, but that's how these games go now. It's about a few key permanents. You resolve those permanents, there's not much an opponent can do.
And look at this mess of a board. We're
Okay.
jumping to this. Thanks, guys.
I'm going to let you figure this one out, Craig. You tell us exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, so we're just looking at the Thopter Foundry sword shenanigans on the one side, and maybe on the other side too. I can't tell yet.
I don't see Thopter Foundry. There is an Urza, though, as well as a Mystic Forge.
Okay. Infinite mana. Not infinite, but tons and tons of mana.
Right.
Some free cards.
So Harlan just missing the Thopter Foundry to basically go off.
Yep.
So much mana in play.
Oh, there it is.
It's just there.
Yep.
It's just there.
And this construct token, you know, it's probably like a 2/2 at this point.
It's possible we're in the midst of watching Harlan play his entire deck.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where you don't want to pass the turn back to your opponent,
Right.
and have them do something
Do the
completely
same.
ridiculous with their turn.
Of course.
So we've seen cards like Spine of Ishtar in the decks at points to just blow up all the opponent's permanents before you have to pass the turn back. We've seen people loop Pyrite Spellbomb with what's the little 3-drop? Help me out.
Scrap Trawler.
There it is, Scrap Trawler. You know, just finish the game so that you don't have to pass the turn back.
Looks like Harlan's at 1 here. So in a precarious position. Plays a second Urza to make a construct. Passes the turn back.
Well, you say precarious, but he has the loop, correct?
I mean, that is my read on the situation. The only thing, though, you see 2 Pithing Needles on the battlefield. They're naming Dr. Foundry. So what must have happened, and you have to bear with us, we came in at the middle of this, Beebe must have assembled the combo first. Führer had to react, did so with Pithing Needle, now preventing him from going off. Interesting spot. Well, that makes this game much closer than I previously believed. Here's the Goblin Engineer from Beebe. Urza has to be one of the most fascinating archetypes presently in Modern. It's unquestionably at the verge of Tier 1.
Yep.
Simultaneously, nobody agrees on how to build this deck.
Sure. Well, I think they're all close enough, right?
I mean, I've seen broad color discrepancies. I mean, here's 4-color versus Grixis.
Yes.
I've seen blue-white versions that don't even touch on these colors. The core...
I was going to say, I feel like you start with the same 45 to 50 cards.
Right. The core looks the same basically every time.
And then a lot of it might just be metagame considerations after that.
Maybe.
Which decks do you want to be best positioned against?
Yeah, this strikes me as the type of deck that we're going to find masters of. People who just live the Urza lifestyle, are adjusting their deck on a week-to-week basis.
The Urza life.
It's a crazy life out there doing Urza things. There's going to be an Urza activation. This is part of the Urza lifestyle. It involves a worthless Thopter Foundry.
You say worthless. Still taps for a blue, right?
Sure. That is true. Mystic Forge on the battlefield for Harlan. You just have to think there's some path to winning this game available for Harlan, given the resources present.
One life is a precarious spot to be in.
Yeah, it is. It is. Here's another Urza activation. There's a very strange card. Shuffle first. Flip over that top one. Spire of Industry. Not what we were looking for.
Oh, was this all in the upkeep?
Believe so.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. Harlan doing a bit of counting here.
Yeah, counting up these constructs. I think they're 4/4s at this point.
Estimate feels a little low to me.
Well, you are the math major.
That's true. I'm locked into this role now. There's a Thopter Foundry. There's another Thopter Foundry.
And I can certainly see the draw of this deck, right? Like the you get to play the Mox, one of the more powerful cards in Modern right now.
Yeah.
There's so much redundancy in the deck where a lot of your cards are very cheap and they can trip.
Mm-hmm. You get to take a lot of game actions.
You get to take a ton of game actions.
Players love game actions,
and then
especially modern players. Man, do they love their game actions.
You get to cast Urza, which is just fun.
Yeah. Here's another sword. Not the most impactful Urza activations, I'll say that. Those constructs have to be very near lethal, if not just lethal, at this point. They will do some attacking, and opposing constructs will block.
What a wild game. And if you're on the other side, oh, so frustrating getting the opponent to 1. Ooh, did we find a winner?
It's like Assassin's Trophy on Urza to remove the only blocker. Question mark? Attack?
I will show you what I plan to do if this resolves.
More question marks? You see on our graphic, I think players are in turns right now. Let's see how this is going to get resolved.
Yeah, we're not sure. Okay, we're getting word.
It sounds like the players have consented to a draw. Just no chance of a game 3 ending in time. They're already in turns. They would each get a couple shots at it.
Yeah,
Nothing going to happen from this Urza deck.
So yeah, that's what was going on there. Is after Alex wins this game,